You are listening to Feed the Beast, a weekly podcast exploring all things food with business partners, spouses, and your hosts, Chef Chris Paul and nutritionist Leigh-Ann Charles Paul of Everything We Eat. I hope you're hungry, because it's time to feed
your inner beast.
So this week, we are very excited to introduce our guest. We have Char Nolan. Hi, Char. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Oh, yes. We're very excited. You wear many hats. You do.
I really do wear many hats.
Yes.
I think that we could say that I am a plant-based educator.
Yes.
I think that pretty much covers all of it. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy teaching. And I enjoy having people resource foods in their community that will keep them or make them healthy.
I love it. We are all about that as well with Everything We Eat. So we're really excited to talk a little bit more about what you're doing and how you got there. And just, yes, we're very excited. So in recent news, however, let's just talk a little about some food news. There's this really cool new thing. Apparently, how we perceive taste can be influenced by sound. So there is a Swedish-based company with Diaz and Swan, and apparently the pair are creating dinners, essentially, that they have different sounds to alter and influence the taste of food. And they're not the first to do this. There are other researchers who have found that potato chips actually taste fresher when they're crunchier. They've put loud crunching sounds, and they found that stale potato chips, people perceive them to be fresher. Rock music will enhance quality and flavor of wine, while tunes of Madonna can increase the sweetness of desserts. And other researchers have found that sharper, edgier music increases saltiness and bitter, and smoother music increases perceived sweetness. So while this may not work for every restaurant, obviously you don't want to hear crunching sounds of potatoes just while you're trying to eat next to somebody who might be eating, I don't know, mashed potatoes, right? This can really work well for fast food restaurants or even fast casual restaurants. And in Sweden, Spotify has actually partnered up with McDonald's to enhance this experience of food. So, you know, as much as I have my own spiel about McDonald's, but I do think the concept is really interesting because food is everything, all the senses. It's your cephalic input, which is the brain input for when you see the food, your digestive system starts working, and then it's from the time you put it onto your tongue, so the taste, it's the smell, it's the sound. I'm a big advocate for local foods and also survival, like primitive style cooking. And I love when I'm in the woods and you're like cooking on a rock and you're hearing everything around it. I think it definitely adds to the experience. So I had this article, and I thought it was really interesting to bring in as Char is here as well, because I know she's also about the experience of food, as you said earlier. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? You guys,
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Pretty
I think
cool, right?
Sensory is very important, especially I think on a larger scale. Like McDonald's, as you mentioned, they probably understand that, and Spotify saw the market and jumped right in, because what's happening is when you go out to eat, besides consuming, you have the experience. So, you know, if you go somewhere and it doesn't smell right, or you went somewhere and you anticipated it to be quiet and it's noisy, doesn't smell right, and there's all these things, no matter how good the food actually was, your whole experience is going to be different than what you anticipated. And, you know, that could be a huge driver for customers, or it could be a huge deterrent for customers as well.
It is. But it's also like altering the taste of the food too. It's not just how your psychology of the food, like, you know, the experience and the environment around you is. It's also like, can it alter the actual taste? I don't know. What do you think, Char?
Well, I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of many years ago when I went to my first Mexican restaurant. Hearing authentic Mexican music while I was eating that dinner made that dinner taste much better.
That's true. That makes a lot of sense.
If you go to some Mexican restaurants today, they play Spotify music that's not related to the cuisine or the history of the dish. And one other thing that I'm reminded of is that realtors tell their clients who are selling homes, before you leave the house today, cook a dozen rolls in the oven or fill a water pan with cinnamon so people will think you are baking an apple pie, because the first thing that people notice when they walk into a home is its aroma or its fragrance. So I think that this sounds like a separate conversation for a long time.
Yes, definitely.
With some sound experts and restaurant planners.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Other people like that.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? I could actually. I mean, I know Steven Starr actually spends a lot on interior design, and I could see him working with some sort of sound engineering, because you'll notice how the themes are for certain restaurants, like Pod, and the way. Remember, we had a dinner in the room. They have the little booth with the different lights, and it was a really cool experience. I think, being that we knew, like, oh, this is Pod, this is like a new age, like Japanese sort of experience compared to going to Tangerine. So I could see it, besides fast food, this being played out in an upscale setting as well.
Yeah.
Except I will tell you this, that my joke with my husband for many years has been, if I ever write a restaurant review book, it will be based on two things: the cleanliness of the bathroom and the comfort of the seat. Yes. And my experience tells me is that if you're eating at a restaurant and the chairs aren't comfortable, they want to move you out pretty quickly. They want to get you in and they want to get you out. And regarding bathrooms, that's a whole separate discussion as well.
Yes, definitely. Well, thanks, guys, for pitching in here. I loved hearing your thoughts. So let's move on to our guest here, Char. Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself, about what you're doing, how you got into it?
I was not born a vegan.
Okay.
And I never even knew that I was going to become a vegan. And as you may know, I worked at Whole Foods Market for many years, and this book had come into the store, The Engine 2 Diet by Rip Esselstyn, who's a former Austin City firefighter. And I remember thinking, oh, what a great book. I guess they're marketing it towards men because it's for firefighters. And that shows you where I was 10 years ago. Several months later, I went to a regional meeting for marketing team leaders, which was my role at Whole Foods Market. And our regional president walked in, and he looked different. And he had mentioned that he had embraced a whole food, plant-based diet. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do this for 28 days, because the book offers a 28-day challenge. I thought, I can do anything for 28 days. I can give up a boneless, skinless breast of chicken for 28 days. On my way home, I stopped at a bookstore. You may remember bookstores.
Yeah, I love them.
And got this book and jumped in the deep end of the pool. And the interesting thing about this book was every day I would write down what I was going to have on day 29. And it was pizza and a cheeseburger and, other things, part of the standard American diet that aren't necessarily healthy for you. But on day 10, and this is very true, when I woke up, I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't have one ache or pain in my body. And it was at that very moment that I made this synapse of food as medicine. And so when day 29 rolled around, I thought, I'm just going to continue to do this. Whole Foods Market was offering its team members an opportunity to go to an Engine 2 immersion in Austin, Texas. And you had to fill out an application telling why you wanted to go. And at the time, I weighed about 100 pounds more than I do. I got accepted to go to Rip's inaugural Engine 2 immersion. During that time, every night they had activities. You could go to samba classes or African dancing, or you could watch a movie that was in the director's cut called Forks Over Knives. And I'm sure that everyone knows the impact that Forks Over Knives has had. I saw the movie 5 times that week because I was so impacted by it. And I was impacted by the science of it, that you could actually reverse chronic diseases related to your well-being. So when I came back home to Philadelphia, I called the producer of the movie, a gentleman named Brian Wendell, and said, can we preview this movie in Philadelphia? I sort of see them as the bedrock of this plant-based movement. On a very hot July night in 2009, 450 people came to a movie theater, and this was before Eventbrite. So to get that amount of people to an event,
that's a lot.
And we previewed the movie. Rip talked for a couple of minutes. My colleagues and I made a whole food plant-based no-oil dinner for some patrons and we used it as a fundraiser. And then after that, I knew that Rip's message and his teachings and his words, that he was onto something. And he's part of the Esselstyn family. His father is Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr., author of Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, which is the book that Bill Clinton embraced to change his life, and Samuel L. Jackson. It's common knowledge, without breaking any HIPAA violations, that Samuel L. Jackson was actually a patient of Dr. Esselstyn's. And if you remember, about 3 or 4 years ago, Samuel L. Jackson lost a lot of weight and totally reversed his heart disease because the things that can happen from following this way of life are just amazing. And I have seen firsthand such amazing, amazing things. I'm sorry to ramble, but see, you mentioned. Okay. So the thing about this differing from what you know as a standard vegan diet, as I like to call it, an SVD instead of an SAD for standard American diet, is that this way of eating contains no oil, no salt, no sugar.
So are you cooking the food or is it just raw?
Oh, no. You cook, make beautiful food. So, you can water saute an onion and it will still caramelize. Might take a little bit longer, but it still comes to a beautiful brown. Or I bake without oil. I'll use substitutions like applesauce or flaxseed or a banana or an avocado or whatever. And for the no sugar, I like to say this, that sweet is sweet is sweet. So for somebody who might be a type 2 diabetic, sugar is sugar is sugar. So the source of sweetness would come from fresh dates or maple syrup, which are the two ways that I pretty much will sweeten things. And then in terms of salt, food is delicious as it is, and you actually enhance its flavor when you don't mask it with a lot of salt, which also, as you know, changes the texture of your food as well. So,
and there are other great alternatives too. What is it, sassafras out in the wild, or I forget the other herb that you can add to things that kind of extract those flavors themselves without adding salt to it, and it's still healthy and it grows wild. So it's good to find the alternatives, or even vinegars too. We haven't really tapped into the vinegar.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's true. Yeah. But that's really interesting. It's like your 10-day. What was really interesting is you said at 10 days, you had this awakening, right? And kind of a transformation. And I learned I went to Penn State for nutritional sciences. And one of our first nutrition classes was if you ever want to change a habit, it takes 10 days to do so. So you are a testament to that.
Overall, I think a lot of people want to pursue a plant-based diet because we know it's effective. We know, it's definitely, not to bash meat eaters, or I eat meat sometimes. I eat a ton of vegan stuff as well, but we know it's good for your heart. We know it reverses a lot of different chronic diseases. And if you go back to some Ayurvedic medicine and Indian medicine, there's a lot of things that you can take away from that. But how do you start? I guess if someone's just looking, I know a lot of my friends or people I know just jump into it. You want to make sure you're still getting the proper amount of nutrition. You don't want to just go in and then like, oh, I'm just going to eat salads all day now, which is fine. But what's in the salad? What are some components, or what are some cheat trips that you have that you could suggest for like, how do you compose a complete meal following this sort of diet where you're still full and you're healthy and you're making sure you're getting all your nutrition for the day?
Well, that's really important because I was one of those people that just jumped into it. I read, I apologize for the language, but Skinny Bitch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and after reading that, I was also in nutrition at the time and doing a lot of local food protesting and such, but advocacy. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's it. I'm going to become vegan. I did it for a week. And I was like, I'm eating a bunch of pasta. Okay, this is cool, but I don't know what to eat. I feel like I'm becoming malnourished now. Where do I go? Because I didn't do a lot of research before I went into it.
Well, food is very personal.
Yeah.
And food is often a reflection of our culture and our heritage. And that I think it's very important to continue what food is in your lineage, so to speak. Yeah. So if you introduce something that's strange to somebody, they're not going to totally embrace it. But if you can say, well, tell me how you make that pasta sauce, and then find a way to, I like to use the word flip the recipe, if you have a recipe, because most of us cook extemporaneously and just kind of have a feel or whatever. I think you know that on Mondays I'm in the South Philly Library with the Charlie card, and I have about 20 dedicated attendees who come every week.
And for those who don't know, what exactly is the Charlie cart?
Good question. A Charlie cart is a kitchen on wheels that contains everything in it that you need to teach a cooking class. And for those of us that teach cooking classes, we also often schlep a lot of stuff with us, but it contains a convection oven and a little convection stovetop and a Vitamix and pots and pans and dishes and everything that you need to.
And cutting boards, it's awesome.
Oh, it's great. It's just wonderful.
Measuring.
Yeah.
So the fact that people keep coming back tells me that people do want to learn about eating a plant-based diet. And I'll just share with you, the other night we made a caulifredo sauce, which was an Alfredo sauce made from cauliflower and seasoned primarily with garlic, onion, and nutritional yeast. And then I threw spinach in the pasta water like 1 minute before the pasta was done. And they all sat there very skeptically and then asked for seconds. So I think, it's kind of like that old baseball adage, if you build it, they will come. I think that we all have a responsibility to reach out to communities and help them access food better. In front of the South Philly Library, there is a fresh fruit vendor there every day. Mm-hmm. And so I'll give one of the students $5 and say, oh, can you do me a favor? Can you go and get me X, Y, and Z? And they feel very empowered with that. And I kind of hope with that action that I get to plant a seed of what they might do in their own homes.
Yeah.
Or when they come back and say, I went to Aldi because, part of this whole plant-based thing is people think they need to go to high-end grocery stores. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that you can go anywhere and shop. And in my classes, oftentimes I'll give out a gift card to Aldi, which they love. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that eating greens, eating grains, and eating legumes is the message that you want to mostly pass on.
Yeah. So that makes sense. I guess the takeaway is that you don't necessarily need to change your whole life, empty out your pantry. Yeah. It's more of like, depending on your culture, let's say, we grew up in the Caribbean, so we have a lot of spices, we have a lot of herbs, we're using Scotch bonnet. That's to say I could still continue eating that. The things you're going to do is we already eat beans and we already do a lot of these dishes. Now, maybe you're just not adding the meat component and you're replacing it with other things and you still have a similar flavor, because I think that's the hardest part, where you're trying to tell someone like, no, when you go home, don't eat any of this. You have to start all over. It's not realistic, especially with the financial burden to be like, okay, now in order to be healthy, I have to go empty out everything and buy a bunch of new stuff. So that's a good point. I never thought of it that way, of, as you mentioned, flipping the recipe, because you could really take any recipe and flip it and, make it plant-based essentially.
When I do pantry cleanouts with people, the one thing that I want them to clean out is the processed junk that they have. I like to see even cans of beans or any kind of rice or whatever. But when you're eating, Captain Crunch cereal or other things like that, and that's the stuff that's hard to unravel, because as we both know, sugar and salt are such acquired tastes for people.
Drugs, essentially. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. And it's funny because I work out of my home and I'll be in my office typing away, and my office mate is my television, and I don't have cable, so figure it out. There's a lot of commercials during the day, and I often stop what I'm doing and just say, this is not real life, about how healthy something is, and you've got to go to your grocery store and get it. And I'm talking to the television saying, this is ridiculous. But unfortunately, the Kale Council, if such a thing exists, doesn't have the funds for commercials. So somewhere along the way, and we had spoken about this a little bit earlier, that you have people who are hungry, you give them food, but that food promotes illness. And so where do you jump in and break that cycle? And what I can tell you is that one day a week, eating a whole food plant-based diet, and we'll make it that Meatless Monday, can benefit your body. For that one day, it will pause irritation on the endothelial cells of your arteries. It will make you feel better. Your blood pressure might go down for that one day.
I really love that you do incorporate a practical approach, because that's the key to being successful. Bringing Aldi cards is really important, because Aldi is they have pretty decent products, and they're also very affordable.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, I've done a lot of nutrition education classes, and the biggest thing is, oh yeah, let's like teach, the craze is quinoa, right? So let's bring quinoa into this, I don't know, West Philly, North Philly community and say, oh, hey, quinoa. And he's like, oh, what's that? It's this grain, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, after I leave there, you're probably A, not going to buy quinoa. B, it's probably not going to be in your local store or if it is in there, it's going to be way higher than basmati or jasmine or whatever, Uncle Ben's rice, right? And so it's not practical for us to impose those things onto others. And that's the biggest challenge, and also key thing that we have to learn as food entrepreneurs or even just industry people. If we're trying to reach, especially for us, we do a lot of educational components. We want to reach a lot of people, and we want to reach them effectively and efficiently, and that's using practical approaches. So I really commend you for that. I just wanted to get off, subject a little bit. I know we were talking earlier about cooking and different things. Do you have like a location where you cook at a kitchen, or do you cook through home, or where did you start, or where do you currently cook now?
Well, I'll kind of make you laugh that I grew up in the living upstairs of my grandparents' Italian restaurant in Queens, New York. So when most 4-year-olds were out playing with friends, I was making linen napkins to set tables for weddings and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in a kitchen. So I think that it's kind of like in my blood. I do a lot of in-home teaching. If somebody wants me to cook for them, it's much easier to cook in their homes. But I will rent kitchen space if I have, for example, have to make 400 muffins for an event or something like that, because I think food safety is a very important key. Having your Safe Serve food manager certification, I think, is very important. Being in the right place to cook your food, I think, is also another key. And I think it's where all home cooks and home-based chefs need to sort of put their focus, because understanding wellness and providing the optimum to your client doesn't necessarily happen in a home-based kitchen, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. Definitely. Not everybody's kitchen is the same.
Well, beyond the kitchen, I think it's the good thing is like you mentioned, renting a kitchen is being in a city like Philadelphia. It is very accessible. You have great organizations like the Enterprise Center, which has Dorrance 8, Hamilton Culinary Center, where it's low commitment. It's not even a commitment, actually. It's per hours as needed. You can really jump in and out. And what people don't realize is, obviously, besides the commercial equipment, from using your home oven versus a commercial oven, way more efficient, it's the underlying factors. Like, you have 2 cats in your house. You have like a 4-year-old who's coughing. You may have carpet. You have a dog. You have all these things. Whereas, once you step out of your house and, we go to Dorrance A. Hamilton Center, there's definitely not a cat in there. There's no dogs. There's really none of that. And we're working with stainless steel, everything. So it's easier to sanitize. And I think the key word here is people think working clean, but you have to take it to the next level, which is sanitizing. Clean is just removing dirt and other things like that. But sanitizing is, really minimizing pathogens to a safe level where, you're not cross-contaminating, you're not getting people sick. And that's one thing I think everyone overlooks it, as we spoke about previous episode. Food illness outbreaks are real. Mm-hmm. We don't notice it as much, but when it happens, everyone's like, norovirus is real. Mm-hmm. That's a good point to make. Yeah, it's so worth it. It's a 5-year certificate, and the great thing is I actually taught the class that Char attended a few months ago, and it's just a good investment. If you are serious about cooking, it's totally worth it, because we all assume we have this knowledge, and then when as you may have seen, when you complete the class, you're like, I didn't even know this was an issue. I didn't even know, what is this? And it's a very real thing. Food is, we all need to eat. But, obviously, when you're cooking for yourself versus cooking for a group of people, it's a different standard that you have to live by.
Well, I also think that even if you're not going to be a chef in production, if you are invited to go teach at a facility, having your Safe Serve is just another credential that Definitely. You add to your resume that I think is very, very key.
And it's almost required in a lot of cases, especially when you're working with children and there's all these allergens, there's all these things that any wrong move, something like celiac, it's not about I'll wipe the counter down with flour. It's like, no, one particle of flour with someone with celiac it just doesn't go. Same with a nut allergy, same with a shellfish allergy. And you really want to be careful and not just assume like, I'm just going to wipe this down with a sponge. It's like, that doesn't fix the problem. Having a ServSafe certification definitely puts you a step ahead.
I agree 100%. And I just wanted to focus on one other thing. When I teach my classes at the South Philly branch of the Free Library, they have to be peanut free because they have to be nut free because of allergies. And when I first met with the health educator at the library, she said, "Is that going to be hard?" But when you follow the pillars of the Esselstyn or the Forks Over Knives books, they are nut free. So it makes it very easy for me to go and teach any kind of class because they're nut free. And so you'll make a delicious bechamel with white beans instead of using walnuts or something like that. And the other thing I wanted to say just about sharing commercial kitchen spaces, it's also a very nice way to network and socialize and meet other people.
Yeah.
If you are self-employed as a chef and maybe working individually with people or doing recipe development or whatever, it can be very isolating. But hang out at the Enterprise Center for a while and you get to see new concepts, new ideas, what people are doing. And I think that we cannot forget about the social aspect of everything that we do, because today it's very easy to get focused into that little screen that's on the table or wherever. But we have to get back to the basics of people, eye contact.
Yeah, great thing in California, speaking of getting back to basics, California is actually promoting food as medicine now, and it's becoming like a legal thing where you can actually prescribe food as medicine. I knew of this one doctor way back in the 60s. He wrote a book on that. I can't remember his name. It's true. Why? Because he did cardiology, and he was just like, prescribe them food. Food is so important. So getting back to those basic things, like, yes, there's been wonderful advancements in technology in medicine, and they're very much needed, but how can we accompany them with food?
When I recall, you're doing your program now at Arcadia, and you had a project where we said, at what point when you're admitted to a hospital, should they be asking you some of these questions, besides your recovery plan? Like we mentioned, I had actually a bone injury. There's certain foods that are really great for rebuilding, scar tissue and things like that. Whereas, when you're discharged, should you get maybe a fact sheet and say, hey, when you go home, maybe focus on these things. And on the opposite end, there's things that are detrimental to your recovery. So I think the more involved we all get around food, rather than just say, oh, just go to CVS and get this jar of pills. Hopefully it works. It's, you rather be like, hey, here's a few things. And you might say, oh, I actually enjoy that. Like, now let me consume more of it.
Well, you bring up a very interesting point, and you're going to have me back for round two. But there is a project called the Plantricious Project, and they make prescription pads that say, when you go home, watch Forks Over Knives. Go to the grocery store and buy X, Y, and Z. And then the physician signs that prescription pad. At the Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx, there's a cardiologist named Robert Osfeld who has implemented a whole food plant-based coronary care unit, a CCU. And so when patients are in the CCU, they can only eat a whole food plant-based diet. And it was difficult to plan the menu. For example, lentils are high in potassium, and you have to monitor potassium levels of people who have heart attacks and things like that. And same with kale. You have to monitor kale because of the vitamin K and its clotting practices or whatever. People go home with exactly what you said. They go home with a docket of what they're supposed to eat. Now, the follow-up, we don't know. But the fact that a hospital has done this is absolutely wonderful and miraculous. And I think we're going to see that same kind of thing here in Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think one of the most frustrating things I've seen, I don't want to make any names, but there's a hospital nearby with a McDonald's in it. And I'm like, how? This doesn't make any sense.
There is a physician in northern New Jersey. Her name is Dr. Sarai Stancic. She is a lifestyle physician. She cured herself from multiple sclerosis by following a whole food plant-based diet 25 years ago, before the internet was even around. And she has a petition going on to get rid of a Burger King that is on the first floor of the New Jersey School of Medicine.
And it caters to the med school, right? The med school students who are coming in doing their rotations. They're there late hours, they're there long hours, and they're just like, okay, let me eat this. And then they go into the medical culture, and now they're dealing with patients. And, you kind of have to be that representative, right? If you're telling somebody something, there's studies that have shown that people that practice what they preach, their audience, they follow them more intently, and they actually do the same thing because it exudes from you. If you practice what you preach, you have a different aura. It's a pretty interesting. Yeah. Speaking of food, just to go back, I see you brought us some really yummy treats. Here.
I like to play with ingredients, and today I thought, let me play around again with some black bean brownies. I made my own flour from oatmeal. We all have oatmeal in our house.
Very nice. Did you just do it in a food processor?
Yeah.
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 Very cool.
And there's black beans. There's almond milk. There's vinegar to help a little bit with the rise. There is applesauce. And I think I mentioned that it's sweetened with dates. And then the top has a little shaving of some 70% chocolate that I happen to have in my house. So
it's delicious, very moist.
You know what? When the kids make these at Meatless Monday, they love them. They absolutely love them. Or we have even made icing from black beans, chocolate icing. Well,
I not know how versatile black beans are, but if you think about the consistency and texture of it, it would make sense.
Well, and the color.
The
color is perfect for making anything chocolatey. So kids kind of, like that. They respond to that. My other sense is that sometimes we have to lean into other cultures. We kind of have to find where they are. I realize that not everybody in the world is going to go and they'll go get a cake mix at a store. And then they're going to add eggs and oil and whatever. But I saw this thing on TV, and, food is science. The kids had a cake mix and a can of seltzer water. And you just mixed it together, and guess what? It made the perfect cake.
Really?
So, you're going down the path. You're not going at 180, but you're moving down the path. And I think that that's the other thing we need to take into consideration is take them along with you, but don't expect them to be exactly where you are on that very first day.
Yeah, slow and steady progress. It's a really good point. And, leading into our weekly entrepreneurial highlight, it's we'll talk about My Soy Cafe. And I actually met you there a while back. You recommended them. I had some of their snacks. Really great food. It's at 630 North 2nd Street in Northern Liberties. And they just really go all out. It's very good food that's very well put together. And you could definitely taste it. And it's nutritious. It's not without all the additives. Can you add anything to that?
No, I think you did great. My favorite thing is their mushroom pho. Is
it lobster mushroom?
No, it's not lobster mushrooms, but it is a broth with ginger and turmeric. And then it has kale, carrots that are in a spiralizer, and then it has grilled mushrooms. And it is my favorite dish. Oh, and rice noodles. So it's also gluten-free. It's plant-based. It's totally delicious.
And that's one thing, too, about mushrooms. That's one of the really great alternatives to meat that people don't realize. I think on average, mushrooms have about 7 grams of protein. And it's a great, I love mushrooms myself. So that makes perfect sense, especially grilling them. You really get the flavors. And there's so much variety, too. Besides, forget the button mushrooms. You have a lot more than that. And especially in PA, there's a ton of people foraging. Any of your local farmers markets, you'll find a lot of really cool mushrooms right from the area.
From delicate mushrooms to more meaty mushrooms. So you may not even miss that piece of steak because you can have a lobster mushroom that is so meaty and just really delicious.
Really filling, too.
Yeah, and flavorful. Yeah,
Trumpet, sure. We are the mushroom capital of the world, Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. And I actually have a shiitake stick. Shiitake log. So I'm growing my own shiitake, and it sounds strange, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
No, we experienced with that. We had a bag of sawdust with some pink oyster spores. You'd be surprised the rate of harvest. We were getting like 2 pounds every 2 days. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Mushrooms are they're like aliens. They're just growing. Really, they just morph and just grow.
They are. They're their own subgroup.
They're also the only naturally occurring vegetable with vitamin D in them. So for
I didn't know
people
that.
who always want to know where do vegans get their vitamin D because they don't drink milk, you can find it in fortified plant milks, but naturally it's occurring in mushrooms.
Interesting. Well, thanks for the fun facts, and thank you for joining us.
I guess where can we find you, and how do we get in?
Any minute now, my website will be live, and it will be called Char Nolan's Plant-Based Pantry. Because most people think everything begins in the kitchen, but it actually begins in the pantry first. When that is up and running, I will let you know, just putting some final tweaks in it and things like that. But I'm on Instagram, Char_Nolan. I post a lot of pictures of the food that I make.
Really good stuff, really good content, and I think it's very informational. So be sure to follow Char Nolan. And I'm sure if anyone has any questions, they could write you in your inbox or even comment, and you're very on the ball. You'll respond and let them know what they need to know.
Can I just say how in awe and love I am with the two of you and what you're
thank you.
doing,
Thank you.
and how you're just building this food empire. I mean, it's laudable and very impressive, and so it's my honor, total honor, to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you.
It's been great.
Yes, and thank you to our audience members for listening. We love you all. We'll tune in next week. We have some more really great guests coming in. And if you want to check out anything we're doing, again, everythingweeat.com is our website. You can check out our events page for interactive dinner shows, for more cooking classes with the free library, and our food truck. My dad will be selling water. He's very excited about it.
Be sure to follow
Yes,
us on Instagram at
exactly.
Everything We Eat Philly, and as well as Chris Ball Chef.
Yeah.
Thanks you for tuning in.
Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Martin, the production consultant for The Grit Live. If you enjoy our programming, the most important thing you can do to support us is share each episode with your friends and family. You can also leave us a rating and a review on the podcast player of your choice to help others find us. Thank you for listening.